Introducing
Pretty Girls Love Real Estate. Stories of everyday women breaking barriers and building wealth through real estate.
Let's get it. Boss. BOSS.
Hello. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Pretty Girls Love Real Estate podcast. I am your host, Jessica Washington, and I'm so excited for my guest today. You may have heard her name. Her name is April Bauknight. On our very first episode of Pretty Girls Love Real Estate podcast, we had our guest, Tay Hayes, and she mentioned that April is one of the people that she started to use for a lot of her real estate deals. And I just wanted to bring her on because she's personally helped me as well. So I like to keep things in the family, keep empowering the ladies that are helping me in my pursuit, in my real estate journey, and just to share her story. And I know she has a lot of great information that she wants to share with us. So again, she's an attorney. But she does a lot of her real estate deals and dealings on the side. So, April, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you, Jessica?
I'm doing wonderful. I'm so glad. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Of course. Anything for you. Thank you so much for considering me. It's truly an honor and a pleasure to be here sharing with you guys.
Oh, it's truly an honor. Thank you for, taking a chance on me. I remember the first time I talked to you, you were like, this girl is all over. She doesn't know what she's doing. So you had to kind of really hold my hand through the process, but I really appreciate it. I learned a lot from you, and hopefully we can continue to build in the future.
Absolutely.
So before you kind of share your wisdom all about, real estate and all the wonderful things that you want to share with us, can you just talk to me about you? Like how, what's your story? How did you get involved and get interested in wanting to do stuff regarding real estate?
Sure. So, and I think actually you have never heard this before, Jessica, so this will be new for you. So before I started focusing on real estate, I had done real estate before in private practice. I'd also done family law, and I just didn't like the family law at all. And I kind of was away from the law practice for a while. Moved out of state, did some other things, relocated. In relocating, I found a job at the Office of the County Counsel for Union County, and it just wasn't paying enough for me to, do the things that I wanted to do. So I was looking for other ways to increase my income. And one of the ways that was suggested to me was, doing real estate. And so a mutual friend of ours linked us up. And so you actually were my first client, like my first client in my own private practice, not my first time ever doing real estate, but my first time doing it completely on my own. So thank you.
Awesome.
For sparking that and just really making it something that's blossomed and bloomed into something that I just had no idea was waiting for me. So thank you for that.
Oh, wow. Well, I'm really glad I could help you be your first. That was my first property when we were first, dealing with finding an investment property in Newark. And step back, we're talking about April practices in Union County in New Jersey, but she also does transactions in Essex County, which includes Newark, Elizabeth, East Orange, all of the hot markets in that northern New Jersey area. All right, so you do real estate and you're an attorney. So there is a really specific process and a really important process when it comes to real estate that you need an attorney for. So can you just talk to people about what you're involved in when it comes to wanting to purchase any type of property?
Okay, so I get involved more hands-on when you have placed an offer on a property and it's been accepted and you enter what's called attorney review. That's when my job kicks in. So I look at the contract, I review it, I make sure there's nothing that's awry or anything we need to be concerned about. I talk to my clients at that time. I walk them through the process from beginning to end. I also check in with them to make sure that whatever conversations they've had during the walkthrough with the seller, like, oh, the seller's going to fix this or paint this, that color, or leave the dishwasher or the refrigerator or stove, and make sure all that stuff is in writing. It's very important that it gets in writing, because what's happening, you know from experience too, that at the end of the day, they're like, oh, I'm going to take this refrigerator because something else in the middle happened that they didn't care for. And if we don't have it in writing, they can just take their refrigerator back. So I explained the whole process, and I feel like my job really is to sort of handhold and keep everything moving. I do check-ins. I make sure, I kind of put my hands on a lot of part of the process. I don't know that every attorney does that, but I do. A lot of times we're dealing with first-time homeowners, so I really do try to like hold everybody's hand and make sure they understand the whole process, because it's really important. So after we do the attorney review, there's all the inspections that get done with the lender. Lender orders the appraisal. If there's any problem when you do the inspection, I come in and make sure that all the repairs that are needed get handled. After that, I order the title work, which is very important. Title work is when the title company goes through all the court records to find out if there are any tax liens on the property, if there are any old debts. Some people owe child support, some people owe motor vehicles. So I just want to make sure that when you get your property, you get it free and clear of any type of debts or liens on the property. I go through all of the title work. They do a background on not only the seller, but also the buyer. So if there's any debts or any issues, those get resolved at that time as well. We're not talking about regular credit card debt. We're talking about judgments. After we get through the title search process, we're almost ready to close. There's a lot of work you're doing with your lender simultaneously. I'm checking in with the lender and making sure everything's okay. The final step is the closing disclosure. When we get the closing disclosure, I go over the numbers with my clients to make sure everything that you thought you were paying for is there. If there's something that's out of line, out of place, you let me know. We go back and fix it and make sure it's right. Once we get it right, we're at the closing table and you're getting the keys.
And that's the best part, but it's definitely a process. A lot of things that intimidate people from buying a house is because there is a long process. And like you said, that title work is super important because you want to get a property that you own free and clear. You don't want somebody coming in later after you've closed and purchased the house, putting some kind of encumbrance on it or saying, oh no, this is really my property. So that's important. But one of the things also people are a little bit confused about is you're a real estate attorney and then you have the title agency or the closing company. Can you just kind of say what's the difference between those two?
Sure. So in New Jersey, you have to have an attorney in order to close a deal. That's not the same in other states. So I think that's probably part of the confusion. In other states, they allow you to close with what's called a closing agent or a settlement agent. The title company can serve as a closing or settlement agent. Basically, that means they're handling all of the final numbers. And a lot of times I have the title company do the initial numbers, and then I go back and double check them. And so they're authorized to notarize and sign off on documents. But they don't always help you with the inspection. They don't help you with the inspection part and making sure repairs are handled. They're not going to be a liaison between you and your lender. Like I've had clients where things did not go well between them and the lender. So then I had to step in to make sure we could either close the deal or quickly get them a new lender so they could, move along with the pieces. So it just depends on what state you're in, first of all, with what's available. But like I said, in New Jersey, that's what the title company does. And they basically do the research to make sure that any judgments, tax liens, things like that are cleared and handled.
Okay, got you. And is there any difference from your angle when dealing with somebody that's buying a property that they want to live in versus somebody that's buying an investment property?
In terms of what title work or just how I think through the process?
I would say, well, I guess both. Is there a technical difference in anything that you have to do? And also how you work with your clients? Is there any difference in your thought process as you're dealing with them?
So generally speaking, my thought process is always the same, right? Like, is this a deal that makes sense for you, right? Either because, you know, some deals, the price is too high. And I say to my clients, are you sure you want to pay this much for this particular property? Are you getting everything that you thought you were going to get? So for example, I had a client who thought they were purchasing a 3-family. Turns out it was only a legal 2-family, and the property was zoned in a two-family zone only. So it couldn't even be renovated or upgraded to be a 3-family. And so we had to go back to the drawing table and renegotiate, because I said to my client, this is way too much money to pay for a 2-family. A 3-family, it made sense. As a 2-family, doesn't make sense, because now you're not getting that income. He was going to live on 1 unit and rent out the 2. So now you lost a complete rental unit. So sometimes I do step in and give that kind of advice, that business advice, just knowing the numbers. From a legal standpoint, when you do have three units or more, there is some extra paperwork that needs to be filed. It's called a bulk sales form, which is basically another way for the state to get taxes from you. But it's a form that you have to follow. If you don't, then it comes back on the buyer. And the penalty really doesn't even belong to the buyer, it will belong to the seller, because the seller had the property. But if you fail to do your due diligence and complete that task, then the buyer's on the hook.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So,
very important.
Mm-hmm. So when you're selling a 3-family unit as well, you have to be cognizant of that. So what a lot of people do to get around that tax is they'll buy a 3 or higher unit. They will purchase it in the name of an LLC, and then that helps you get around having to pay the tax or even have to submit a bulk tax form, because the exception is if you operate in the regular course of business of buying and selling real estate, then you don't need to complete that tax form. So that's a way to get around that.
Okay, that was just a gem right there for all you investors out there. So, and that was something I just learned just now. Now, also people, some people that are investors, they get their properties from an auction, or either they get from a tax lien sale, which is someone that was delinquent on their taxes for however long, and then they go directly to the city or the municipality to get their property. So can you just tell us a little bit about that process and how that's different from a regular transaction?
Sure. So what happens with that process is the counties have a listing. They have to put them in the paper. They have a listing. And then our county does it once a month. I don't know if other counties do it more, but once a month, you come to the county, they have an auction. Most times people know what property they want. So, and they know about how much they want to pay. These are cash deals. So you need to be able to present that certified check in the amount for whatever you purchased it for, or I think maybe like, I forget the percentages, but maybe it's like 20 or 30% at that moment, and you have 5 days to bring the balance, because you obviously don't know how high you're going to go with the property. So you bring your money in, and then that seals the deal for you. But those are cash transactions, and you don't really have the benefit of doing a title search as you would in a traditional transaction. So if it is something that you're interested in, you have to do a lot of your legwork before you even acquire the property.
Okay, so even before you purchase the property, you have to do your due diligence as much as possible, because sometimes you may not be able to actually walk inside the property when you're dealing with the auction or tax lien sale. So some of it is kind of like a step out on faith. You have to use kind of non-traditional resources of finding out as much information as you can about the property, because, you know, once you're in it, and you can't get your money back at that point. So very
Exactly.
helpful information.
You're welcome. So you might need to spend more money to find out, right? So whereas in a traditional transaction, you already know you have the deal before you start spending money on title work and inspections and stuff like that. But at this point in time, you could do a title search on a property. You could actually have a title company do that. But like you said, you can't get in, you can't do inspections. So you have no idea what is going on with the oil tank, if there's one there, what the windows look like, nothing. So I think it's great. It's a great opportunity. It's a great investment. If you have the cash, access to the cash to do it, it could be very, very lucrative.
Okay, and I'm glad that you mentioned oil tank, because I'm, originally from Washington, D.C., and that's not something that we really have a lot of there. Like, I never even heard about having an oil tank on a property until I moved up to New York and New Jersey area. So the people that are not familiar with that, can you just explain a little bit about the oil tank and why that's so important in the process and why people care so much about that?
Okay, sure. So oil tank. Some people use oil to heat their houses. So if you have like a radiator or type of furnace, then and it's using the oil tank, then it's fine. And you could decide to continue using oil. A lot of people, because the oil prices were, going up and down, they want a little bit more consistency. And also because it's a little bit safer and cheaper to have gas, people were transforming their oil units into, well, they can't transfer the unit itself, but they were transferring their heating source from oil to gas. There was a big push by the Elizabethtown Gas Company, which ironically my dad worked for before they switched names. So at the gas company, they had this big push for, they were giving incentives for everybody to, transfer to using gas, kind of like solar panels are now. So a lot of people did take advantage, but some people didn't always remove their oil tank. So if there's an oil tank on the property that's been there for a while, you don't know if it's cracked, you don't know if the oil is dripping into the soil, like you just have no idea what's going on. So you have to get it removed. What's happening a lot in New Jersey is if you're selling a property with the oil tank that is not in use, the more often than not, you're being required to remove it. And that's at least a $10,000 to $15,000 process to get that removed, especially if you already have the gas heat in there.
Right. And like she said, it's important also because if the tank is damaged for some reason and, you have oil seeping into the soil, now that soil is contaminated and that can cause, damage to so many other things. And cleaning up that soil is not expensive. Removing the oil tank is, one price, which can get a little pricey, couple $1,000s. But if your soil is contaminated and now it starts seeping over to become a problem at the neighbor's property and, other areas adjacent to your property, then it's your issue to fix and it becomes super, super expensive after that.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. So let's back up here. Like you mentioned like your dad, and I know he's also an attorney. So was that kind of, influential in you being involved and wanting to do more with real estate?
So yes and no. My dad actually didn't become an attorney until I was 12, but I knew since I was like 6 that I wanted to be an attorney. I had a brief period where I got the opportunity to work with my dad in his private practice, which is where I learned how to do real estate when we were doing the private practice together. And I wound up doing a lot of real estate and a lot of family law. So I was kind of like the family law go-to in the office. And so, yeah, so he taught me everything I know about it. And I wouldn't have ever really learned about it probably if it weren't for him, but.
Cool. Keep that legacy going in the family.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's shift a little bit. We talked about what the importance of using an attorney and kind of the process of going through your title work when you're purchasing a property. Now let's talk about, since we're talking about legacy, when you want to hold that property and you're thinking about passing it down to your children. And also, in these times of the pandemic, a lot of people are unfortunately losing their lives, getting sick, whatnot. You always preach the importance of estate planning and being able to pass on your assets. So can you just tell us a little bit about some of the different ways that you can protect your real estate assets if you want to, carry them on to your kids?
So every situation is obviously different, and you should definitely consult an attorney to make sure that you have a plan that meets your unique needs. Generally speaking, though, you can leave property to whomever you want. You can leave it by that person specifically. If you have several people you want to leave the property to, you can leave a share of the property to each of them. A lot of times people are selling the property, so they'll split it. Like, let's say I have 3 children, they sell the property, they'll split the value in thirds. I can also do a trust. A trust gives me a little bit of control over how the property gets handled or how the money gets handled. So for example, I can have a trust that says I can leave it to my niece and nephew. I can leave this apartment building to my niece and nephew. I can leave it to them first to live in if they need to live in it. I can designate that a family member has to live in it. I can also leave it to them to manage or operate, or have somebody operate on their behalf until they get of the age of majority and they could do it themselves. I can have the property sold and then have the money from that property either given to them either right away. Maybe they get a portion at 18, a portion at 21, a portion at 30, whatever age I decide. If I decide I want them at 21, but I'll give an allowance for college expenses or something like that, or for them to invest in real estate themselves. So you can make a lot of contingencies on that.
Okay. And so what's also, I know there's a living trust and then there's the other type of trust. Can you just, define what the difference is between those two?
Okay, so there's a trust where I can make a trust right now while I'm alive. It's called inter vivos. And then, or I can make a trust that happens in my will. Those are usually your irrevocable trusts. So I can put money aside, have it spent, in accordance with whatever terms and conditions while I'm alive. Once I'm no longer alive, then that trust has to get dissolved. Or paid out, however the terms of the trust are. And then the whatever terms for the trust that I have while my will is, and then those things would take place once I passed away.
Okay. So is there any other type of vehicles that you can use besides a trust or a will when you're talking about converting over real estate assets to any other family members or to people outside of your family?
So yes and no. So there's, you can give people access to what you have. If you want to transfer anything over, it's done by a deed, right? And I'm giving up complete authority or autonomy about this, and I'm passing it on to you. There's what we call a durable power of attorney, which if I gave you durable power of attorney over my house, let's say, then you can make the same decisions about my house that I could. So in theory, I could be alive, perfectly able-bodied and right mind, and you could sell my property if I gave you durable power of attorney. I can also make my durable power of attorney, they call it a springing one, which means it doesn't go in effect right away, but it goes in effect when a certain condition is met. So I could have the durable power of attorney take effect if I became incapacitated, or I was in the hospital bedridden for some reason, or if I started to get dementia and my mental faculties weren't there. So you can set those parameters as loose or as strict as you need them to be.
Okay, so a lot of flexibility in what you do with your assets and, who controls it. So like she said, definitely consult with an attorney if that's something that you're thinking about, because there's a lot of benefits and cons to all of those things.
And
all
remember,
right.
You only get that flexibility when you actually make a will. If you don't do it, then the state tells you and everybody else what to do with your money. So
Right. So that leads me to the next thing. So if you don't do these things that she's telling you that are great to do, what happens? Like if you unfortunately were to pass, like I said, during this pandemic, a lot of people, even, young, healthy people are losing their lives and, families are kind of trying to figure out what to do next. What would happen if you had a property and you just unfortunately passed and you didn't have any type of will or any system set in place for how that would pass on?
So a lot of things can happen. The first thing is when you pass away and you have a bank account or a house or something that you haven't specifically designated to someone, the state has a statute. It's called intestacy, which means you die without a will, where they dictate how your money gets divided. Practically speaking, what will happen is, let's say I die tomorrow and I don't have a will. The first person to get to the surrogate's court with my death certificate and some type of something saying, hey, I'm qualified to handle this estate, I knew her, then that's the person that gets to handle it, unless someone comes in and contests that. Generally speaking, it's the first one to get to the surrogate's court.
I see how that could get super messy. Super messy.
Yes. So for people who have not fully divorced their spouses and, they've moved on, like everybody's separated, but that paperwork isn't there. Guess what? That wife you think is your ex-wife, she's going to go and get everything. And I've seen it happen so many times.
Okay, so definitely get a will, get trust, some type of documentation. So, unfortunately things happen, not even with this pandemic, tomorrow's not promised. So definitely, take advantage and handle your assets so you can know you have a plan in place. Also, another thing I want to talk about now is with this pandemic, there are a lot of people, unfortunately, that have been out of work, that they're not able to pay their rent or their mortgage in certain situations. That rolls up to the landlord, who now can't pay their lender. But how does the city get affected with all this? Because I haven't heard any city saying that they're deferring like their property taxes. So can you give us a little insight about what's going on with that?
So it hasn't happened yet, but what's going to probably happen is, as people are, first of all, your property tax is still going to be your property tax, whether you can pay it or not. There's not going to be a property tax forgiveness. What I suspect will happen is that, similar to the market crash, there'll be sort of maybe a smaller type of a crash. What will happen is people won't be able to pay their property taxes, and when you can't pay your property taxes, then your property is going to go up for auction. So there'll be more properties that will be auctioned because of it, if they're not able to pay their taxes.
Right. And especially in New Jersey, taxes are super expensive. I think New Jersey is like the top three highest in the country.
Yeah, definitely. Mm-hmm.
Highest in the country for property taxes. So even if you're a person that owns your home free and clear, and you can't pay your property taxes, it still can unfortunately be taken away and gone to auction. So it's just going to be interesting to see what the ripple effects of all this economic unrest with this pandemic are going to be, especially with real estate. So cool, very insightful. So I know also when we spoke before, you wanted to share some information to people out there who are looking to purchase a home or a property for investment, and they may be hesitant because they are intimidated by having to do repairs and purchasing a fixer-upper. So just what information did you want to share with us about that?
So I am a fan of the fixer-upper, and here's why I'm a fan of it. You get more equity and more value in your property in the long run. So you buy something that's lower in price. Let's say you pay about $250,000 for the property. I think max you may wind up putting in about $100,000 for a property, especially if you bid it at $250,000. You're probably looking at $100,000, and that's to do completely everything if you need to. And you can probably do repairs to, like, the kitchens and the bathrooms are the number one repairs you need to do. Everything else, you get walls and new paint and you should be fine, maybe some new floors. But the kitchens and the bathrooms are where all realtors and anybody that does an investment will tell you where to spend your money. Once you get those things renovated, now you go from having to be all in at, let's say, $350,000 to instantly your property is worth $500,000. Mm-hmm. So by just investing a small amount, you have increased your equity in your property exponentially. And there's no savings plan that's doing that right now. There's no CD that's doing that right now. I mean, you may be able to get a good stock that's doing that, but that's kind of fluctuating right now. So I just think it's a great way to create wealth and equity.
Okay, so definitely makes sense from economic perspective. It makes sense for the numbers, but I guess what advice would you give to somebody that's like, I hear you, sis, but I'm like, I've never done anything with construction. I've never fixed up anything myself. What advice would you give to somebody for that?
So don't try to do it with your own bare hands. I would say watch the Property Brothers. Like, watch a couple episodes of the Property Brothers. There's a couple other shows on HGTV that I think would be very interesting to just see and watch other people's experiences. It gives you a good idea of all the things that could go wrong potentially and how they find solutions for it. I also think that you just really have to do your research to find a good contractor. There are some really good contractors out there. You just have to find them. Know what you're looking for. You can utilize Angie's List to find a contractor. I think word of mouth is the best way to find a contractor. And I would just ask other people I know who are investing, who are doing things. One of the things, Jessica, that you did was you were at one of the real estate meetups, which when they were doing them, it was at a time that I couldn't always make it there on Mondays, but a few times I did. And I know there they had a lot of people who were in different areas of the investment property business. So that's another way you can really leverage your network to meet a contractor that will help you out.
Absolutely. I would say one thing that people also don't take into consideration when they're looking to do any type of repairs is that you also need permits from the city. Like you can't just come in there with somebody, even if they're not necessarily licensed, you can still do this, but you can't just come in with somebody that's like, I'm going to change this, I'm going to change that, I'm going to knock this wall down, I'm going to do that. You have to get permits from the city to make sure that you're doing all these repairs the proper way. And if you don't, that will kind of really affect yourself moving forward. I don't know if you remember this transaction I was trying to do at first, but I was trying to buy a property. I was trying to buy a property and it looked decent and everything. But then when we started doing the internal review, like she was talking about, we found out there were a lot of different repairs done and there were no permits because the buyer was a handyman or he was a contractor himself and he did all the work himself, but then he didn't get the permits. So can you just tell about, why it's important about the permits and how that can really hinder a transaction?
Yes. I'm so glad you brought that up. I did remember that. And it was, I definitely had to step in and be like, oh, no, we can't do this. So again, another example for why an attorney is helpful. So let's see, permits. Each town is different. So you have to really check with each town for what things you need a permit for. You don't need a permit for everything, but if you're probably knocking down walls, you probably need a permit. The town they're vigilant. They usually find a way to find out what's happened. A really key component is once you put that dumpster out there and start filling it up, the city inspectors, as they're going by, they're going to start making some phone calls and making some inquiries. So no, the neighbor across the street didn't tell you. It's just the inspectors riding through the town and doing their due diligence. So fortunately for you, Jessica, we found that out early because we did our due diligence. And so you wound up not having to be stuck in the deal that was going to be a real hindrance for you.
Absolutely. And I just want to say, like, the permits are not just to be like a hindrance or for the town to collect extra money. They're actually for safety, because you want to make sure that when you're building stuff, it's done properly. You need a certificate of occupancy when you first property changes hands, and make sure everything is in place, make sure there's the proper code with the fire, make sure you have different means of egress so people can get in and out if they need to. If there's emergency, making sure you have fire extinguishers, making sure you have sprinklers if that's the case. So it's all for the means of having a safe and habitable property.
Yeah, that's a really great point, that the town is there to help you, not hurt you, right? They're trying to make sure you're going to be alive. If there's a fire, it's going to be contained and not spread. So you're right. You got to think about those things, and they are trying to protect you.
All right, cool. So thank you so much, April. I'm going to wrap it up here with our fabulous 4, which is 4 questions that I ask every guest. So just, answer from your heart, off the top of your head, no pressure. So the first question is, what is your favorite real estate book?
So I don't know that it's solely a real estate book, but the book I'm going to recommend it's called Get It Together, which I think is a great title. I don't remember the author, but it really goes through and lays out how to get all of your life and your affairs in order, and includes property. So it tells you how to make sure you have doctor's line, the doctor information lined up if something happens to you. A lot of people have allergies, right? And so if you're allergic to penicillin, let's say, my mom's allergic to penicillin. So I know she can't have penicillin, but the person taking her from her house may not know that. So how do we make sure that information gets translated to different caretakers and care providers? So it just walks you through A to Z, everything. It leaves no stone unturned for you to really kind of help and prepare yourself. And so as I think, real estate is important about building a legacy, you need to protect and keep that legacy. Otherwise it's for naught. And you did everything your whole life for this one moment to be evaporated. That's not good.
Absolutely. Definitely important to get all your affairs in order when you're trying to make any moves, or, you're just living life. You want to make sure everything is in place. Cool. All right. So, the second question is, what advice would you give yourself, knowing what you know now, that you would give your younger self in terms of your real estate career or investing in real estate, anything like that?
It's never too late to start. I think a lot of times we get scared or we get concerned or we feel like, oh, I have this, or no, it's never too late to get started. Once you get started, you're gonna be like, why didn't I do this sooner? So I think it's just never too late. And then also train your children how to do it. Like once my daughter starts working, I'm really going to help her get her own investment property and start really thinking about her own economic legacy, the future she's going to leave to her children or whomever when she gets to become 21. So my
That's
two things would
cool.
be, yeah, start. No matter where you are, just pick up and start, and then train your children.
Awesome. It's never too late to start, never too early to start.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. All right. The question number 3 is, what is something you personally want to learn more about involving real estate?
I think I would like to do an actual, like purchase a property at an auction myself, to really kind of take that chance, take that risk. What am I going to get myself into for this $20,000 or $40,000 that I'm doing? I think I want to do one of those.
Okay, yeah, it's definitely intense. I've been to a property auction in Newark, and it's definitely fast paced.
It
You
is.
know, if,
Whoa, what's happening? So yeah, I think I want to do that.
all right, cool, definitely. And we both know a lot of people that get property, via auctions. So I already know that you have the good people that can kind of walk you through that process.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So the very last question, not really a question, but can you please shout out one other woman doing some amazing things in real estate?
So I want to shout out a really good friend of mine from college who is trying to get her foot in the door with real estate. Her name is Nicola Mattis. She's actually in California. I sent her the first podcast that you did with Nate, and I said, you need to listen to this, all of it. Because there was some really good information and really good content. So thank you again for doing this and for allowing me to be on. And I am sharing the word. And I wanna get a shout out to a newbie in the game and encourage her
Awesome.
to keep moving and doing what she's doing.
Well, I'm glad that you found value. I'm glad that you shared it. I really appreciate it. Definitely want to use this platform to educate other people and also just inspire. Like you said, it's never too late. It's never too early to get started. So wherever you are in your journey, you can always learn something. So I really appreciate you sharing that. All right. So lastly here, just tell the people where they can find you, and if they want to contact you to do business, how can they get in touch with you?
So I'll leave my phone number. It's 908-485-8505. 908-485-8505. I have a email address, info@acbauktesq.com. They can reach me there. And I look forward to hearing from people. I am on Facebook with my name. I'm on Instagram at AprilB_Noen, no G at that. And that's it.
All right. And I know you all also do, you and Nate, you also do some first-time homebuyer seminars and different classes and workshops within the community. Do you have any one of those coming up soon?
So it's so funny. I just got the alert that it was a year today that we did our first one. So we were as we were going back and forth on Facebook, we were talking about we got to get a new one going. So we'll definitely put that in the works and we'll let you know so you can share it with your fans.
Okay, absolutely. Will do. Well, thank you again, April. I really appreciate it. Thank you for doing this, and just thank you for being you and always helping out. So I really appreciate everything that you've done.
Yep, and thank you.
No problem. All right.
Started.
Absolutely. So, all right. Thank you again. This is another episode of the Pretty Girls Love Real Estate podcast. All the information that she shared, as far as her contact information, will be in the comments, will be in the show note description. So you can definitely contact her. As you heard before from the Tay, April is a tremendous resource. She's super professional. And as you heard from her, like, she wants to make sure that you're really taken care of, and she really walks your hand through all the process. So I appreciate it for that. All right. This is the episode of Pretty Girls Love Real Estate podcast. Thank you for joining us.